Blogging might sound like a content marketing strategy that died off in 2019, but what if it's actually one of the most powerful kinds of content when you want paying clients and not just likes? Because here's the thing, I have been blogging for over 15 years. In fact, my very first job in the online business world was managing a blog for a 7-figure online health business. And while blogging has gone through plenty of is this still even relevant phases, I am so excited to see that the long form written content strategy is making a big comeback in 2026, but not in the post every week forever kind of way. In today's episode, I'm talking with Jana O about a smarter, more sustainable approach to blogging, one that's designed specifically for coaches, service providers, and practitioners who want clients, not just content burnout. We're digging into her concept of a capsule blog, which is a small, intentional collection of posts that do the heavy lifting in your marketing without you having to constantly be creating something new. So, if you've ever loved the idea of blogging, but you hated the pressure of week to week consistency, or maybe you wondered if written content could actually work better than chasing trends on social media, you are going to absolutely love this conversation. So, let's dive in. I am so excited to have with us today Jana O. Welcome to the Nourish CEO, Jana.
Thank you so much for having me, Laura. I'm excited for our conversation too.
Yeah, me too. And for some extra context, I likely would have mentioned this in the intro to the podcast, but if you're watching the video for this show, I have been blogging officially for, on and off, I would say. I wouldn't say like consistently, but pretty much for like 14 years at this point for my business. And it was one of the first jobs I had was ghostwriting for another blog. And so I feel like when I think about blogging, it's one of those things where it kind of feels old school, but it also feels like one of my preferred ways of creating content. And I follow Jana on Threads, and I just have noticed her talking about this concept of a capsule blog. And as somebody who has been consistently putting out new content for weeks and weeks, for years and years, I am always interested in like, how do we do this whole like put some stuff out there and then stop kind of perspective. So, the reason I wanted to bring her to chat with you guys is because I know that a lot of our MBA students use blogging as one of their primary traffic sources, one of their main ways of getting new clients. And I just thought this concept of a capsule blog sounded really interesting. So I am really excited to chat with you about that. Before we jump into that part of the conversation, do you want to just give us like the nutshell version of who you are, your expertise, and why this is something that you
Yeah.
talk about?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks for having me again. And it's so funny that you say that you've been blogging consistently because my first thing I thought when I heard of that was like, oh, you don't have to blog consistently. So, and
Nobody
you
told me that.
yeah, and you said you'd been doing it on and off, and I thought to myself, that's great, because a lot of my students do blog in seasons, is what we call it. Not like podcast seasons the way we talk about it in podcast world, but more like doing a season of blog writing and then maybe taking a break, doing another season of blog writing, and then stopping once you have your capsule library built. So, but yeah, as far as me, I mean, I've been in online business now for about 9 years. And I, studied marketing long ago, went into corporate human resources actually, and didn't really come back to marketing until about maybe 11 years ago when I was working for my parents' business for a little while and then started working in like marketing consulting in order to go online and have some location freedom, which I know a lot of your listeners can probably relate to. And I was actually a Pinterest marketing strategist for many years. And I did that for so long. And a lot of people know me that way. But my Pinterest clients and my Pinterest students were always asking me, like, what should I pin? And I would say, like, oh, you can pin your blog posts, you can pin your landing pages, you can pin this, you can pin that. And they'd say, yeah, but what should I pin? And I was like, wait, I just told you, and I kind of realized after finally listening hard that they wanted me to actually help them with their content strategy. Like, what should I actually be putting in these blog posts that would make it so that when someone finds me and finds my blog post, whether it's on Pinterest or anywhere, that this is going to be a blog post that actually gets them to hire me. And so, meanwhile, I was running my own business and I built a capsule blog library myself that I could leverage. And I did use that for all of my content for years and really looked at sort of the common denominators of what I was doing. And that turned into the program that I run now, which is called High Leverage Content. I use that blog and I'll explain a little bit about how it works in a little while, but to get myself fully booked out. I was double booked for a long time, got a lot of experience that way, made a lot of money that way. And basically, I increased my prices 3 times during that era as well. I call that my booked out era. And I just believe really strongly that a blog first marketing ecosystem is what someone who actually does client work should have. Because those of us that do client work, whether that means you're a coach or a service provider or a practitioner, we literally, if you think about your calendar, it's blocked off with clients and you have a very limited amount of time left over in your work week, especially if you don't want to be working full time, or even if you are working full time, to do the marketing. And so something that's low lift and repeatable, that's blog first, is something that I think is really valuable for people. And so that's why I teach it that way. So it's a little bit about, my story and where I landed with this program and why I do this. So,
Yeah, I
yeah.
love that, and it is always funny to me when we talk about creating content, and it's like there is so much of that. Well, what do I do? What do I put out? And I think with
Mhm.
blogging, I always think about how blogging really, for a lot of people, used to be like, here's what I did this weekend.
Mhm.
Here's, kind of almost more of like a diary
Dear
that you're
diary.
sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I wouldn't say, okay, I wouldn't say never. I feel like when I first started blogging back in 2011, it was a little bit more of the, like, here's what I'm doing and here's what I'm reading and all of that, but it was, like, focused on a particular topic. It was definitely
Yeah.
focused on nutrition and health and that kinda thing. And then when I started working with clients, it definitely shifted more into a strategy to demonstrate expertise and to
Right.
attract people, and, I mean, I still honestly, I still get tons of traffic from the blogs I wrote, like, 10 years ago for better or worse, because we get a lot of people coming to my website being like, looking for liver recipes. I'm like, "Okay, well, I'm a business coach now, so it's not necessarily the traffic I want." But all of that to say, if that was the traffic I want, it would be very helpful to have things that, I did 10 years ago still driving people to me today. So I do think with blogging, and you could maybe speak to this a little bit, I feel like for a lot of people, the two issues that might come up is either they do more of that, let me just, show you what I did this weekend or talk about my hobbies kind of blog, or they kind of swing in the other direction where it's almost like, a WebMD article about a health condition that's so clinical and jargony that it's not necessarily doing the best job to promote their services. So I don't know if that's accurate, but I could imagine that's like with the clients I work with, that is one of the things we have to constantly kind of like pull them back from that super science heavy, super almost like they're writing a school paper or,
Mhm.
graduate thesis or something versus an actual blog. So I know I can't remember if we were recording when you said this. I think maybe we weren't. You had mentioned you work with a lot of like really smart people who maybe have that same problem. Tell me a little bit about how somebody might want to be thinking about blogging as a way to actually get clients and not just like again write a school paper on their
Yeah.
website.
Yeah. Yeah. I call that expert brain. And of course, I have a whole blog post about it with different strategies for helping with that problem. Because when we speak with literally using words that our audience isn't using when they're talking about their problems, or when we're writing in a style that really isn't story oriented and it just isn't really connecting with them on the like hitting emotional notes that it needs to, in addition to showing the expertise that sometimes those more like dissertation style pieces can, people tend to either ignore them or just not connect with them, and it doesn't move people forward in that customer journey or move them towards buying. So definitely really important to be looking at that and thinking about different things that you can do to make sure that you're speaking the language, of course, that people use. So your content doesn't get ignored and so that it also can connect with people. And that's definitely part of what's important when you build a capsule blog library. So we'll talk about what the capsule blog library is, but you are very intentional about the topics that you select when you are building a capsule blog library. And coming back to what you had said a second ago too about the Dear Diary kind of problem that some other folks have too when it comes to blogging. I always say to my students and clients and just my audience in general, you're not a blogger, you are a coach with a blog or a practitioner with a blog or a business owner with a blog is kind of one way to say that. And I think that some of that like Dear Diary, like what I'm doing today, what I cooked tonight, especially if you're in the health space, top 10 books to read if you are whatever your niche is, trying to get pregnant or working on this blood sugar or whatever it is. A lot of that, when people are thinking about topics in that way, that kind of goes back to like you said, the early blogging days. But those types of topics are the things that can work for quote bloggers. And we're not bloggers. We don't want to be writing all the time. We don't want to be putting out a new blog post every week or every month. I actually think that it's counterproductive to our goals to always be putting out new content, new content, new content, because I think it can give people a little bit of whiplash and it makes it harder for them to like remember you for the things that you want them to remember you for. So that brings us back to this idea of the Capsule blog library, where what we do is we build the Capsule blog library. It's 12 to 20 pieces of content. It's like a small but mighty collection of blog posts. I say between 12 would be the minimum and 20 would be like the maximum. When I built my first Capsule library in my own business, it was like 18. So I feel like that's kind of the sweet spot. And we're choosing topics very intentionally based on the key things that our audience needs to hear and learn and understand more deeply or in a better way in order to feel ready to buy our offers. And so we're not just blogging about whatever we did today or whatnot. You can do that too if you want to, but that's not a capsule worthy topic, if you will. A capsule worthy topic is going to be one that is something that people need to, again, hear or learn or understand more deeply to feel ready to buy your paid offer.
Mhm.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say with the capsule approach, I really like that it's not this ongoing
Mhm.
pressure to be posting all the time. And a minute ago, you said it was actually counterproductive because it creates whiplash. Can you tell me what you mean by that?
Yeah, I think, when we're influenced by, excuse the pun, the influencer culture or even maybe the blogger culture, we start to think that we have to be like that person who's always putting out new content or on trend content in order to stay relevant. And again, that isn't really consistent with our goals. If your goal with your blog is to get clients, instead of putting out new things all the time or always racking your brain to come up with some new idea or looking at trends to see what you should be writing about, instead, you want to be, like I said, reverse engineering and thinking, what do people need to know before they buy my offer? And writing about, those things. And so if you're constantly putting out new things, it doesn't give you that opportunity for repetition that we really need in our marketing. So it's very important that once you've identified those key things that your audience needs to learn and hear and understand more deeply, and you articulate them in a place that's evergreen, that lives on, which I believe should be your blog on your own website, that then you shift away from creating new things all the time or putting out a new blog post every week or every month. And instead, you shift your focus more towards repeating those main messages in different ways, in the same ways. You can repeat the exact same thing again um, in any places where you've decided that you want to show up and have a presence. So if you're a social media person, you repurpose your blog posts that you've written, your capsule blog posts, into social media posts on a regular basis. If you are a audio person, you can create podcast episodes with your blog posts. Same thing with YouTube. Speaking topics, emails. The way that we do this is that we build the capsule library. And then once you've built your library, instead of writing new things, you start cycling through those blog posts that you've already written, and you start sharing those messages in the different places where you want to show up on repeat. And so I actually show kind of a visual of this in my free blog strategy training. But if you can picture a calendar, the way that I teach this is that if you have, let's say, 12 blog posts in your capsule library, let's just say theoretically, it can be anywhere between 12 and 20. You share from blog post number 1 for like 2 weeks in any places where you want to show up. And then 2 weeks later, you share from blog post number 2 for 2 weeks. And then for 2 weeks, you share from blog post 3. And as you can imagine, you get to the bottom 24 weeks later, and you're sharing from blog post 12. And then in week 25, instead of sharing something new, you go back to the beginning again and start talking about the same things you talked about, 24 weeks ago, which is actually a really long time ago if you think about it. So we're cycling through these main messages and resharing them and becoming known for them. And as people who are trying to build trust and rapport and demand really or desire for our offers, repetition in this way is actually what we need in order to build that and get people signing up for our offers, not
Mhm.
not new content all the time. So that's what I
Mhm.
mean in terms of the whiplash, I guess,
Yeah.
really.
Well, I love that because whether we did this intentionally or not, this is something that, because I don't have like what you were calling a capsule blog necessarily. I
Hmm.
may I may need to be reevaluating my approach to blogging since I feel like I learned how to do it 14 years ago. But all of that to say, I we do a weekly newsletter that has one blog post, whatever our podcast episode for the week was, and then like, personal intro and that kind of thing. And we don't have new blog posts every week. So basically what I do is we'll just recycle
Yeah,
like the ones that I think are the best ones or the ones
there
that
you go.
align with our philosophy. So it is funny though, because we have people joining our email list literally every day. So if somebody joins my email list today, they're not going to have gotten last week's newsletter. They're not going to have gotten last month's newsletter. So why would I think that they all need to have like brand new stuff all the time when I could send them the thing that I was talking about 6 months ago or 3 months
Yeah.
ago? So I love that because I think for a lot of people, one of the reasons that they experience income ups and downs, especially as they're getting busier and as they're actually like seeing clients, is because when their business gets busy, they start to kind of pull away from content creation because it's like, okay, I gotta like work with my clients. I don't have anything to or any time to work on content right now. So I love that the system that you teach actually accounts for that and allows them to really not have to be creating content when they're super busy with clients, because that is something where a lot of people, they get busy with clients, they stop producing content, and then, oh, I haven't made a sale in a month, like I better start getting back on the content train again. So that can feel really stressful for people if they're like on that roller coaster every month.
Yeah, definitely. And I think when we disappear from our main channels for a while, whether it's social or email or wherever we're showing up, unfortunately, what happens is like that momentum you've been building with people who are either new to your audience or not so new to your audience. It's like you're kind of starting from the beginning again. So you're losing out on that momentum and that leverage that you have if you're not somewhat consistent on those other channels. So I think there was something you said on a podcast episode that I listened to a while ago from you about having a system to have multiple touch points and making that easy. And when I heard that, my ears, perked up because that's what I believe this system, the Capsule blog library, is doing. It's really there to help you understand and how to articulate those main messages. Like, what does my audience actually need to hear and learn and understand to be ready to buy? First of all, identifying what those things are, and then writing the blog post in a way that delivers that information in a certain structured way that it'll land well. And that's where that conquering expert brain becomes important. Although it's important in the topic selection process as well. But basically, I just lost my train of thought there thinking about expert brain. But those touch points, making it easy to continually have those touch points, even when you're busy with clients, and having a system that you can do in, just a couple of hours a week. Back in my booked out days, when I was a done for you service provider and my calendar was booked out with clients, I had one full day per month that I had scheduled on my calendar, which was like non-negotiable. And sometimes I would like go somewhere so that I wasn't even distracted to recycle and repurpose lots and lots of content from my Capsule blog. And then I would schedule it out so that I knew that there were always those touch points going out. Just in my minimum viable places, like one social platform and my emails. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And we've talked about something kind of similar to this as far as a private podcast series being a really great lead magnet for doing similar sort of having a similar purpose where the goal is to help them have the understanding, the beliefs, the perspectives that they need to see your offer as the solution to their problem versus just being like, let's just talk about all this information the whole
Right.
time, which we can get into that. I would imagine you have probably a similar philosophy, but I love that you could potentially take that same podcast and turn it into a blog. Or if you have the blog, that could be the podcast and it could be an opt-in, like what you were saying about that being something that inspires either video or audio. So I just think there's so many different ways that this stuff can be repurposed. And as somebody who has two children, three and under, I'm like, repurposing and reusing things is like life right now. So let's talk a little bit about kind of what I was just saying, where there's probably things that people might think you should be writing about in a blog, but it's not necessarily having the impact of pointing to their offer the way that it needs to actually function as a marketing tool. What would you tell somebody who maybe their MO with writing is like, I just want to make this really informative, really helpful blog post. Is that what they should do? Should they like have a different perspective when they're deciding what to talk about and how to
Yeah.
write about it?
Yeah, I teach a 9 and 2 content pillar system, and there are basically like 9 types of content that we write. And with some of them, they are focused a little bit more on educational content. But even in those blog posts, the way that I recommend that people structure them, like without giving like a whole, we could talk about this for an entire hour, this particular like how to structure a blog post. But
Yeah.
essentially, we want to make sure we're structuring it in a way where, let's say you're going to share, let's say you're exploring a problem that you know your ideal audience has, that they know they have. That's important. And you're talking about that in a blog post. You're going to maybe come up with 3 different things to talk about in like the meat section of the blog after you've done an introduction that connects emotionally. And maybe among those 3 different things, one of them is really purely educational. Like, here's a strategy that I try with my clients that works for many of them. Here's how it works. You could try this literally tonight to sleep better, right? And then maybe another one of them is a strategy that's something that you actually do inside your offer with a tool that's only available to people who are inside your offer. So you're talking more about why it's important, what it is, but you're not necessarily getting into like the how part of how it works. It's not as simple as just like the old adage, like, only talk about the why, but not the how in your content. Like that kind of works, but also it's a little more nuanced than that. But making sure that the things that you choose to educate people on are actually things that you do inside your offer so that it's easy for you to be literally talking about your offer. And it's an easy segue into talking about like little mini transformations, mini case studies inside blog posts, for example, work really well. So, yes, we can absolutely educate and give people information, as you were saying, but choosing what information we're going to present, because there are literally umpteen thousand things you could talk about in a blog post that's about a certain problem. So, when we decide in advance and we're outlining what we're going to talk about, we want to make sure we're selecting things that are going to make it easy for us to talk about our paid offer and connect those dots much more easily from the thing you're recommending that maybe that they want to try to your paid offer. So I'm not someone who says like don't educate at all in your content. I think it's important to find a balance, but I think that probably most people do err on the side. I'd say it's like 70% of my students come into my program erring on the side of educating too much and never talking about their paid offers. And the way that we structure blog posts is we want to make sure we're educating, but in a way that is directly connected and aligned with your paid offer so that it makes sense to that person, that the next logical step for them, if they're looking to help solve that, for help solving that problem, would actually be your paid offer.
Mhm.
So I hope that is what you mean by information. I mean, there's lots of ways we could kind of go with that. But when I think about whether or not you should be educating or just providing information in your content, that's how I think about it. It's like a balance and also being very discerning about what information you're giving and how you're tying it back to your paid offer.
Mhm. Yeah, I think this is something that honestly affects any content channel. I mean,
Right.
blogging obviously is what we're talking about, but really any place you're putting out content that the goal is to create sales for your business, which I
Yep.
mean,
It's all
honestly,
of
if
it.
you right, and
Yeah.
it's like I think sometimes people like the people I work with typically are people who almost too much get into the I just want to give away my stuff. I want to,
Yeah.
share my expertise and I get it cuz again, I've been on this blogging and podcasting train for over a decade now and so I completely understand the desire to share your expertise. But I do think that thinking about it through a lens of what does somebody need to know or believe to make my offer an obvious,
Yeah.
next step for them is that applies anywhere, and I think blogging is one of those things where people might not have that same lens because they're, maybe they're using it in their Instagram content or, in a webinar or something, but they're not necessarily looking at the blog as being able to do that same work as well to create the beliefs and to create the desire for the service and not just
Mm.
be this, again, this like, here's the information you need and, you know, good luck and see
Yeah.
you later kind of
Try it
thing.
out. Let me know how it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think sometimes people worry about creating long form content in this context because they think, well, how am I going to write an entire blog post about something without making someone feel as though I just gave them everything that they need to go out and do this on their own? And so some of what I was just describing is how I recommend people structure blog posts so that you can deliver like massive value, but still have it lead to your paid offer and set up a sale for the right people. And I think you're right. Like we do sometimes think about that more in short form content, but I also believe long form content is actually what gives us the space to actually go deep enough to show people those key things that they need to understand and set up those beliefs that they need to have in order to be ready, which is why I think long form content just converts better and faster and kind of always has. So it's interesting that you're saying that because I always feel like people are feeling as though blog posts or long form content is like that danger zone, like, oh, I'm going to give away too much for free, and then people won't think that they need to work with me. So,
Mhm. Yeah.
different perspectives, but
Yeah. And it's funny because this is kind of random, but I don't remember if it was an article or something that was talking about how people in the like, I think it was like the 25 to 45 age range use subtitles when they're watching shows more than people that are like 60 and older.
who need them?
And yeah, well, for hearing loss, but like for
Yeah,
example, I watch every single show with subtitles on if I can do that because like I don't know what it is, mom brain, maybe I have ADHD or something, but it's very hard for me to just take in the information just from the
yeah,
visuals or the
yep,
audio. And so the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I think sometimes a lot of the content strategies that people are using really are depending on speaking to people who can absorb content from video or audio. And I do think there's a lot of people, maybe like me, other people out there who they actually don't do as well with recorded like video or audio content and they would actually really benefit from the written approach. But if you're not writing that stuff in a blog or in somewhere that they can actually get more than like, a hook from Instagram, then you might be missing like an entire collection of potential clients that won't consume a video or won't consume a podcast because that's not how they like to learn. So I don't know if that's something that you've ever talked about with your clients, but I know for me, I actually really like reading content, and I think my brain, for whatever reason, can process written stuff a lot of times easier if I'm trying to learn something that I really want to understand versus just, conversations or
yeah.
interviews where it's a little bit more like a personal story or a personal perspective. But if it's like, I really want to understand this particular topic and how I can potentially implement this, I feel like for me, the reading and the written
Yep.
content is actually the preferred way of consuming that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, first of all, that tracks in my house too, because I am. So my husband is older than me. He's about 16 years older than me, and I'm always the one that wants the subtitles on when we're watching TV, and he finds them so annoying.
Oh, yeah.
But I win, so that totally tracks, which is really funny because you would think that he would be the one that needs them, but no. And yeah, I definitely think that that's also one of the big benefits of repetition in your content is you can reach people in different places, but you can also reach people with different learning styles. So if you have a really seminal blog post that you're repurposing, on the regular. And by the way, if you have 12 blog posts, you don't have to be perfect about being like, I'm going to share this one for 2 weeks, this one for 2 weeks, this one for 2 weeks. If there's one you really like and is high converting, I have a couple that I know in particular are ones that people just repeat back to me all the time about, in my onboarding forms and things like that. Oh, I read your blog about this. And so, I knew I was ready. You can add those in more often. You could, cover those for longer periods of time, whatever. But I do think that when you have something like that, breaking it down into different types of content on different platforms for different learners or people with different learning styles, and also people who just like different platforms as well, again, is one of the ways where that repetition, even though we think repetition like makes us boring, it doesn't. I always say repetition doesn't make you boring; it makes you money. Um, it sets you up to be able to be more omnipresent without a lot of extra work. And yes, saving time is a great benefit of content repurposing, but I think it's so important to remember that it's also a strategy. It's literally a repetition strategy so that people understand what you're saying. They're hearing it at the right time. There are those multiple touch points. We're building trust over time because people see we're talking about the same things that we were talking about a few months ago, which actually, isn't that common anymore. In our industry, people pivot a lot and nothing wrong with pivoting. But if you're not, like, you might as well lean into that and show, listen, I'm still talking about the same things. So I think that's another big benefit of repetition is being able to reach more people and in different formats in the way that they want to be reached.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, and even if somebody is new to your audience, just because you're repeating yourself from a month ago or 2 months ago, like that could be the first time they're hearing it. And so
Yeah.
you don't want your most high converting topic to be something that goes out once a year or something at most. It's like maybe you should be talking about that once a month if that's
Yeah.
something that that particular blog post is doing really well for you.
Yeah. Exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
kind of a side note, how does this layer in with SEO? Because
Yeah.
I think SEO's changed a lot, especially with all the AI and, the ranking for AI search on top of Google search right now is kind of like new things that we have to be paying attention to get that kind of traffic. Is this something where SEO is kind of like a totally different conversation and that's, maybe something that would benefit from ongoing content being put out? Or is this actually something that can layer in really well with SEO as being a
Yeah.
primary traffic driver?
Yeah. It can kind of be either one, to be honest. I teach unforced SEO. So this is a concept called unforced SEO that I teach in my program. And unforced SEO is the idea that if you are choosing the right topics, if you're using a really rigorous topic selection process where so I teach the system where we're actually looking at all of our brainstorm topics and all of the 9 categories, my 9 pillars, and we're actually ranking them. I'm sorry, rating them. I always say rank when I mean rate. Rating them based on relevance to our audience, alignment to our offers, and then ease, which basically means like, do you have enough to talk about to make this like a whole deep blog post? When we're focusing a lot on that R, that relevance, and we're writing about things that real people experience, real problems people have, they want to solve, our content is naturally going to be Google friendly. And then we're also doing things like making sure we're incorporating first person perspectives into the blog posts. And there are other things that we do, in the actual like writing process that make our content search engine friendly, but we're not writing around keywords. We're not starting with a list of keywords and saying like, okay, I need a blog post that's like an ultimate guide to this keyword. I need a blog post that's the ultimate guide to this other keyword. In my experience, I've noticed that when people are starting a blog for marketing reasons and to attract clients, that if they try to go keyword first, it doesn't always have like their strategy doesn't have a lot of legs. They tend to lose motivation. They don't really love their keywords. Sometimes they write a whole blog post with this is kind of nerdy, but like about a keyword, but it turns out that's not actually what people are searching for when they're searching for that keyword. So it doesn't really even end up ranking for them anyway. um, so instead of doing that, we simply don't worry about SEO for now and we write things that real humans want. And we know that that's setting us up for search engine success down the road, especially because of the way we structure our blog posts. But we're not trying to like contort ourselves around keywords or choose our topics only based on keywords. So some of my students come to me and they've already been doing an SEO strategy and they're even getting some traffic, but it's not converting. And this system solves that for them. And then other students come to me when they're starting a blog and maybe they've tried writing around keywords, but it just didn't really work out. Like like I said, they kind of like lost their motivation to write and whatnot. So starting a blog this way and building your what they call domain authority and your expertise, Google talks about like EEAT as a concept where they want you to be writing from your own experience, your own expertise, authority, and then trustworthiness. When we write this way, it naturally incorporates those things. And so it helps, set you up for that, but you're not losing momentum in the beginning. You're still creating a blog that's actually going to bring you clients now.
Mhm.
So I do have some students that write this way. They write their capsule blog and then they will also layer in an SEO strategy separately. And it's almost like you have 2 different strategies, and that's okay. It's not like it's 2 different blogs. You still have them literally on the same blog. I've had people ask me that question before. It's same blog. um, but you can have some blog posts that are written for conversion and some that are written for SEO purposes.
Mhm.
And then, some topics lend themselves better to SEO than others. So depending on what your niche is, you have to think about whether Google SEO and also now AI SEO or AIO are actually strategies that make sense for you based on whether you're going to be able to rank for certain topics anyway, whether you're going to be able to compete for, certain keywords over, you know, hospitals and mind body green and, places like that that tend to dominate for those keywords. So to answer your question, yes, it can be layered in with an SEO strategy, but the way that I teach writing, we're not like contorting ourselves around those keywords because otherwise we lose momentum.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I would think, especially now with just the volume of content that's out there,
Yeah.
the speed at which you can actually show up on the first page of Google is probably a lot longer than the speed that if somebody reads a post that's designed this way to actually promote your offer, that could get a client a lot faster than hoping that Google picks up your blog and shows it to people when they're searching. So
Yeah.
I'm very pro SEO. I don't think like
Yeah.
I don't intend this to sound like, oh, I don't think it should be something that you care about, but especially for newer business owners, like, I could totally understand, like, you might have to be doing SEO for a few months or even a year or more before that actually becomes a significant traffic source. So,
Yeah.
not to say it's a bad strategy or that you shouldn't do it. I think it's a long game approach. But if you're writing in a way that's not actually designed to get clients, then it's like
You're
it could
waiting a long
take,
time. Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
And then that person, maybe they'll get on your email list because you have like, oh, join my newsletter or
Yeah.
whatever, which I don't know. That's not what I recommend, but
Yeah.
this is a very common website structure that I see for a lot of
Yes.
people where it's like tons of information, trying to rank for Google. Join my newsletter. Nobody cares about the newsletter.
Yeah.
Just having the situation where it's like this really, really long process for actually getting people into your world that would be ready and interested in paying you. And unfortunately, like the way that the market is now, a lot of times people will end up buying from somebody else because that person sold to them faster. So if you're not selling to somebody who just joined your newsletter, then they may be like, this is really great information, but I already bought from somebody else, right? So I do think that starting with this as like whether you're brand new to blogging or you've been doing the SEO thing for a while and it's not getting you sales, I do think having this particular type of series on your website is really smart because you can always come back to the SEO, right? Like you can always get
Yep.
back into that once this is created and continue to aim for ranking. But
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely can. However, I do really believe, because I've seen it happen so many times, that when you're writing for real humans, so this is again coming back to what are your topics, right? So do you want to write a blog post about what you are cooking for dinner this week, or do you want to write a blog post about a problem that you know your ideal audience is looking to solve, that your offer helps solve, right?
Mhm.
And we've already talked about why the second one is a good option, or the better option as it relates to conversion and preparing people to feel ready to buy. But there's also an SEO application here. If you're writing real content that's relevant for real humans based on what they actually want to solve, you are setting yourself up for future search engines to pick you up. And this is how I ranked on Google when I was doing my blog initially. I never set out to start writing for keywords. I just started writing what I believed my audience needed to feel and, hear and understand. I was countering objections. I was, talking about what problems I knew my offer at the time, which is a done for you Pinterest setup, was going to solve for them. And that was just my gut instinct. And I did that. And then about a year after I started my blog, I made friends with an SEO strategist through like a networking event. And she was like, hey, let's look at your Google Search Console. And we did. And she's like, oh, look, you're ranking for these things, because these were real things that people were wondering about who were considering Pinterest as a strategy. So, and like everyone I know who started business around the same time I did, or even later, and eventually ranked on Google, who is a service provider. I'm not talking about people, again, who are bloggers, because if you are starting a blog and you're planning to monetize with affiliate links or ads through Mediavine or whatnot, like you need to be an SEO whiz. Like,
Mhm.
no, it's not going to work if you don't do SEO, because you need so much more traffic than we need as service providers or coaches or practitioners. But everyone I know who ranked on Google, they didn't start their blog intending to write around keywords. They started their blog based on what they wanted to write. Now, I wanted to write what was going to sell my offer. And that's what I want you all to want to write as well. And that's how they ended up ranking. It sort of happened because they were writing things that real humans wanted. And then all of a sudden they realized, oh, wow, this is showing up on page 2 of Google. If I do a few things to this blog post, I'll bet I can get it to page 1. And that's
Mm.
what happened for me over and over again. And that's how I got on page 1 of Google. And that's one of the reasons I teach this way too.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Okay. I this may or may not be controversial. I never know
Ooh.
because I feel like people have very different opinions. Do you think that blogging needs to be something that is fully handwritten, old school, like not using AI at all? Okay.
No, no. No, I teach a 4-step writing process. And step one is outline, and we use our brains to do our outlines. And I have a very specific, process to follow, and it's different for each of the 9 content types. But then step 2 is where we take our outline and we pop it into ChatGPT. And I've built GPTs for my students, but you can also do this in regular ChatGPT and have ChatGPT actually put it into prose. So you're kind of taking like your I call it a brain dump, but it's a very structured brain dump, giving it to the AI tool to actually put it into words for you. So it's your ideas. We're not letting the AI think for us. You can't do that for so many reasons that we don't have time to talk about. But you're using the AI to do like the heavy lifting part, which is to put some of the main pieces at least into words. And then we still have 2 more steps in the writing process where we're adding in our own thought leadership where it needs to be through examples and changing words that need to be changed to make it be on brand for you as needed, and then refining. So I definitely am very pro AI. I'm obviously really careful about the way that I teach it because what I don't want is people writing a bunch of slop that isn't going. I mean, it almost sounds obvious. Like if you're going to write content that is going to prepare your audience to feel ready to buy, it can't just be a bunch of generic words that sort of relate to what you're talking about, but sort of don't. So yeah, I'm very pro, but also very specific and discerning about the way that we use it. So
Yeah,
what
well,
about you?
I mean, I love AI.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I also hate it. Like I
Yeah.
have this experience where like I
Yes.
use it all the
Mhm.
time, but I have over a decade worth of before AI writing, content creation, long form stuff, and I think like all of that trained me how to know what good content looks like. So
Yeah.
I do a lot of if I use anything with AI, it's like I'm usually editing it pretty not heavily necessarily, but like I'm not just like taking what it said and putting it on my website, right?
Right.
So a lot of times lately, and I'm this is not the capsule strategy for sure, but lately something that I've been doing is using AI to actually read through transcripts of coaching calls and pull out topics
Yeah.
that I talked about just like naturally. Because for me, I find that a lot of my best ideas and a lot of my best like ways of describing or teaching or educating on stuff or coaching on stuff is in the moment, kinda like almost like a download type of
Yeah.
experience where it's like, "Oh, I just said something really smart. I kinda think I should, like, create that for the public and not just, like, lose it off this, like, one recording that I did one
Totally.
time." So
Yep.
I used the AI. I created my own bot to, like, do the actual blog process, but a lot of it's like, take what I already talked about in this one-hour coaching call, and let's turn it into something that can be a blog. So that's one thing I really love about using it. I think what you're talking about is much more intentional about having that collection of posts that are more relevant. But for me, I know that there's so much stuff that I share with my clients that could make a really good written post. And it's like,
Yeah.
I do not have the time to be reading through the transcript, reminding myself of what I said, and then like trying to write something. So
Yeah.
I just didn't know. Like, I saw this ad where they sell this service where they'll like see what keywords could be ranked for, and then their AI, like, literally just
Oh yeah.
churns out blog posts for you, and I'm like,
Yeah.
That doesn't sound like I can see the appeal because it's easy and it's, lots of volume, but
Yeah.
I just feel like that's the kind of stuff that people will ignore very easily, and so
Right.
I like that your perspective is, let's start with your unique perspective, your thought
Right.
leadership, all of that, and then let's not, make it that we have to write every single word. Like I think ChatGPT can expand on what you were saying and write it in a way that is easier to read, and then you can make sure it's aligned with your actual perspective and it's not just like hallucinating.
Right. Well said. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know we are out of time. I would love to keep picking your brain about this, but we'll have to do it at a different session because I'm like, I love this strategy. If people want to learn more about how they can actually implement this for their own business, what's their next step?
Yeah, I walk people through how the capsule library works and what we do with it, and some of the key questions that people ask about it in my free blog strategy training. So anyone who's listening and wants to learn more, go a little deeper with me, can check out that training. I know you're going to stick the link somewhere for us, but it's at janoomedia.com/free blog training. Super easy to find. And yeah, that would be a great place for people to connect with me and learn more about this strategy if they think it might be a good fit for the way they want to run their business.
Yeah, I love it. Well, we'll make sure to link below whether you're watching the video or listening to the podcast. It'll be in the show notes. Jana, thank you so much for coming on and sharing. Like I said, I think this is such a brilliant strategy and it
Thank
really
you.
warms my heart as a long time, long form content creator that this is something that can be relatively easy in the sense that you don't have to be writing every week for the rest of your life.
Yeah,
And it can be very effective for getting clients, which is ultimately the goal for most people's businesses. It's not just
absolutely.
to write a novel on your website. So
Exactly.
really appreciate you coming on and sharing your expertise with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah. And thanks for everyone hanging out with us on the Nurse CEO podcast. We'll see you here next week. Bye, everybody. If you're listening to this and realizing that you're ready for more in your business, more income, more alignment, more confidence in the value of your work, then I want to invite you into a deeper level of support. Inside my mentorship, the Nourished Business Accelerator, I help coaches and experts like you create a premium offer that reflects the actual transformation they deliver and build a clean, sustainable system for enrolling dream clients consistently. All without cold DMs, manipulative tactics, or high pressure sales calls that make your stomach turn. Everything we do is grounded, ethical, and designed to help you grow with integrity and ease. When you're doing work that runs this deep, you deserve real mentorship from someone who's been through every season of business and can walk you through it step by step. And the truth is, growth feels so much more aligned and so much more powerful when you're surrounded by an intimate group of ambitious, ethical entrepreneurs who are committed to building their businesses the right way, not the hustly, performative way that the online world so often pushes. Most people don't realize how heavy their business feels until they finally experience what it's like to be supported at this high of a level. The NBA is the space where you will stop second-guessing yourself, stop piecing things together alone, and step fully into the leadership and strategy that make your business feel profitable, spacious, and deeply aligned with who you are. So, if you're ready to grow your business in a way that honors your expertise, supports your offline life, and helps you impact more clients without burning yourself out in the process, the NBA is your next step. To learn more or apply now, send me a DM on Instagram with the word NBA to @LauraSchoenfeldRD, or you can check the show notes for the link. I would love to support you as you grow into your next level as an online entrepreneur.